Hey guys, happy Tuesday night. I'm Rob Whiteside. This is Deep in the Plus. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate it. We are talking holiday movies. We've been doing that for a few weeks now. We were talking to Tom Corliss about Disneyland around the seasons. We talked to Jill about the Lego Star Wars Christmas special. And, now we've got not one but three movies to talk about tonight. And with me is the guy that stepped up and said, let me be the guy to talk about this. It is Eric Wolf. How you doing, Wolf?
Good. How are you?
I'm good, man. So we were doing Halloween movies, and you jumped into chat and you were like, "Hey, Halloween movies! I can't wait for Christmas movies. If you're doing Santa Claus, count me in."
Yup.
And I was like, "Which one?" And I think you might have said the third one. And I was thinking, you know what? If we're gonna do the third one, we might as well do all of them, right? I feel like I lost you. Like there's a big old grin on the screen, and I feel like I lost you.
Oh, I froze. I'm back.
Are you?
I can hear you.
You know what? I think the squirrel's probably... There you go. All right, I see you again. We're good. Anyway,
There we go.
Yeah, so let me talk about this movie for a second, because I was a huge fan of this movie when it first came out, and I honestly felt like with the first one that I was just like, this felt special. This felt like it was kind of a modern-day classic already when it came out. The original came out in 1994, and it was a really cool movie. So, it had Tim Allen in it. Tim Allen was one of those when you got him in a movie, you were like, you weren't really sure what you were going to get. There was For Richer or For Poorer. There was Jungle to Jungle. There was The Santa Clause. Now, obviously, you're a huge fan because he's Buzz Lightyear, and nobody loves Toy Story more than you, right?
Yup. That's exactly the reason why.
So he's like, he is a Disney legend. I mean, he has been in so much stuff. I mentioned, these three movies, all the Toy Story movies. The thing about Toy Story to me, is that, like, Tom Hanks doesn't voice everything for Toy Story. Like, the rides in the parks and the dolls that you buy in the store are voiced by his brother Jim. Yeah. To my knowledge, Tim Allen voices all things Buzz Lightyear, doesn't he?
Yes, to my knowledge as well. He does everything, yep.
Yeah.
He does, toys, all the things in parks, everything that you can basically see Buzz in. Unless it's in a different language, then, those are other voice actors. But yeah, he does it all.
Well, maybe he should be doing all the stuff in another language. I mean, come on, Tim, step up, start doing the stuff in the foreign languages, learn Russian, learn Japanese, learn to do Buzz in all these different formats. I think he's great. My favorite, actually, Tim Allen movie is not a Disney movie. It's Galaxy Quest. So if you're out there, I was going to say, you know it, but if you're out there and you haven't watched it, you got to see it. So let's talk about this movie. So this one is the very first one we'll start to talk about. This one is a very interesting telling, and you and I reviewed Noelle for the Cast Pantry show. And that one, at that time, we talked about there were different tellings of Santa Claus. Sometimes it's a generational thing that it gets passed from one person to the next. Sometimes he is everlasting. In this particular case, it's a kind of a dark twist on Santa Claus, that to become Santa, you basically have to kill the first one.
Yep.
So how old were you when you first saw this movie? Do you remember?
So if it came out in 1994, I was 4. I was 4 turning 5.
Yikes. So then if that was the case, the first time you saw this movie, I mean, do you think it was probably a little scary, the fact that Santa falls off a roof to his death?
So I actually don't, I don't remember. All I remember is watching this movie and loving it. And I think it has to do with my love of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, A Year Without a Santa Claus, all those type of stop motion Christmas movies. I just enjoy, and I grew up with watching them during the Christmas season. So my earliest memory of watching this movie, loving it.
Yeah. So me too. But obviously, I wasn't 4 or however old you were when you were watching it. So for me, that's a pretty tough thing. You see Santa fall off a roof, and it's only a two-story roof. And if he's got his magic, I'm not going to shoot plot holes into that. He falls off the roof, and what I looked into when I was going deep into this movie is that apparently the original script called for him to be shot off the roof. That Tim Allen was supposed to have a gun and shoot him. Definitely would have been a different twist on this one, but he just yells, "Hey, you!" He falls off the roof, he falls down, and then there's that little sad little wave before he disappears forever.
Yep.
And it feels like a Jedi sort of a thing, right? I mean, I'm sorry, I forget you're not a Star Wars guy, but in Star Wars, the Jedi just kind of disappear and leave the clothes. So that's kind of what happened. He leaves the clothes, he puts on the jacket, he becomes Santa. Let me tell you what I have a problem with here now, and you tell me if it bothers you, and maybe it's just me as a parent, but in the movie Hocus Pocus, I don't feel like that movie happens unless Danny, the little girl, bullies her brother at every turn. Bullies him into lighting the candle because he's the virgin, bullies him into going to the house, all that kind of stuff. I feel like that's Charlie here, right? He keeps bullying his dad. He's like, well, if you love me, you'll put on this weird guy's outfit, climb up on the roof, get in this sleigh, and go deliver toys if you love me. Don't you feel like that's like... I mean...
I agree 100%. I feel the exact same way. And we'll talk about it more because there's 3 movies. But, like, it's always Charlie and Charlie pushing his dad. But I think at the end of it kind of, I guess, like, explains it. Because Charlie and Scott's relationship is so broken, I guess you can say, right, that Scott is willing to just do anything that Charlie wants, kind of thing. Yeah, I feel you though.
Charlie. And honestly, like, I feel like it starts out Charlie's kind of bullying Dad anyway because he doesn't do this, he doesn't cook a good meal, and he's not as good as Neil, and Neil has all this other stuff, and I feel like the kid's really pushing him in the beginning anyway. So. He is the catalyst, though. If it's not for Charlie, he doesn't hear the noise. He doesn't go outside. He doesn't put on the coat. He doesn't climb up the rose-such-a ladder. Which, by the way, I don't think I ever thought of that as the line from the poem, rose-such-a ladder, until this movie. And now that's what I hear every time I hear a rose-such-a ladder. That was kind of cute, though, when he's like, Dad, I heard a clatter. So they go out and they get in the sleigh, and he goes and he delivers gifts. And it's kind of a neat take because it's his first time doing it. Now in Noelle, same thing, right? Her first time doing it, trying to figure things out. The suit doesn't quite fit him yet the same way. So I mean, I think it's kind of a neat idea, the concept that this happens, but that he's going to go ahead and deliver all the rest of the toys for the rest of the night and not really like question it is kind of, that's a big leap to take, right?
Yeah. I always wondered how much did the first Santa get done with and how much did Scott have to do?
Yep. I think of the same thing too. This movie is rated PG. The other 2 after it are rated G, and it's rated PG for some crude humor. Is it just basically the reindeers passing gas? Is that the crude humor, or is there other stuff that you think happens along the way?
I actually don't think it's that, because of the fact that Comet, if I'm not mistaken, passes gas in the second one as well. So I don't think it's that. I think it honestly had to do with Tim Allen in 1994. The fact that he was very much not a typical, family-friendly comedian.
Right.
And this was very much like a throw-in, like he was doing Home Improvement, and it was like, oh, he's good. Like, he's good with the kids.
Yeah.
So, but I think it's honestly because of that, and he might have, because all of these great actors that we see and all these great comedians that we see in different roles in different family films and different things, like ad-lib a lot. Mm-hmm. So I can see him ad-libbing a couple of these lines and then them having to be like, oh, okay, well, PG-13 for this one.
Yeah, I mean, well, and it was only PG, but maybe I'm not even sure PG-13 was around in
Oh,
1994.
okay.
But I would say though, you're right. I mean, if you ever watched any of his stand-up early on, and I actually got to see him in Vegas like a year ago, it's not clean. And it's really funny that he, all these guys like Tim Allen and Eddie Murphy, that they become like these family actors,
Yeah.
over time, and maybe that's just the arc that they follow from their comic starting place. But it's interesting that he was the it guy for Disney. I mean, you were talking about Home Improvement, which was ABC. He did Jungle to Jungle. He did Toy Story. He did the Santa Claus movies. I mean, does Disney in the '90s even exist without Tim Allen?
Right. He's such a big actor back then for this company.
Yeah. And he was there at the opening of Toy Story Land, when that opened up in Florida. I think he is like representative of that brand. So when we're talking about this opening up, it opens up the Christmas party, and he's already a toy maker with the initials SC. I mean, like the writing was on the wall from the beginning, right? So he works for a toy company. Scott Calvin are his initials. So when he gets to the North Pole, he feels like he's having some kind of a weird fever dream. He's there with the elves. They're all, and again, we talked about this in Noel. In different movies, sometimes the elves are little people, sometimes they're children, sometimes they are creatures. And in this one, they look like they're basically children, but then, of course, they talk about how old they are down the line. And immediately, they're all calling him Santa Claus. And so they bring out the card. He sees they show him that there's the Santa Clause with an E, which, by the way, in the intro, when they say the movie, the title card, Santa Claus, they have it in Courier, and then it magically turns into like a Christmas font. And I wonder, like, what was the concept behind that? Is it foreshadowing that he's going from businessman to Santa? Is it more talking about the idea from the clause, like the legal term, to the holiday? I don't know, but it was cool, and I never noticed it before. So just throwing that out there. So he gets there, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. They tell him there's this clause. He put on the coat. He's the guy. He kind of goes along with it. Judy, the elf, thinks he's coming on. He's coming on to her. Says, "I'm sorry, I'm seeing somebody in wrapping," which seems super inappropriate. No, it was a little girl actress, but whatever. And so then they go, and he goes to sleep, and he wakes up in his bed, and he's back home. And so again, could have been a fever dream, but he's wearing the pajamas. He's got the SC on it. Could be Scott Calvin. He's just like, going back and forth trying to figure out what's happening. But Charlie is like, yeah, my dad's cool now because he's Santa.
Yeah.
So that's all it took for him to win Charlie's love, was for him to become Santa. So then, then the transformation starts happening over time, where he is kind of realizing that this is actually happening to him, and he's getting fatter. He's, his hair is growing gray. He's getting this beard. Little strange children see him and sit next to him and sit on his lap on a park bench. Yeah. 1994 was such a simpler time, wasn't it? So I want to show this. So they say that it took him about 4 hours to get into the full Santa costume. So here's the rubber Santa suit that he had to climb into along the way, and 3 dudes gluing him into it. That's always fun. So he said it was in an interviews, it was a very arduous process to get him into the suit every time. So, but I mean, I think the transformation is good. I mean, it's well done is what I mean by that. He really turns into the classic like Coca-Cola Santa in this, with the long beard and the whole deal. I don't like the Miracle on 34th Street vibe where everyone thinks that he and Charlie are nuts, though.
Yes, I agree.
Kind of frustrating, right?
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's one of those things that, like, I think it's one of these like holiday tropes now. And maybe back then there wasn't that many movies except Miracle on 34th Street that kind of like dealt with that whole thing. But now it's become a trope that, like, oh, I'm either from, like you think back to Fat Albert, the movie Fat Albert, and it's like, oh, I'm coming from a TV show. It's like, oh, he's crazy. Noelle, oh, she's crazy. Like, it's just a trope now that no one really like just believes. And it's kind of odd because it doesn't also, especially with these Christmas movies, you would think that it would deal more with just believing, and they kind of don't. It's such a weird, like, gray area.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. It is kind of that, and I think we talked about this with Noelle. I hate that they always start from a place of not believing. And when we get on to the other two movies, I feel like you don't really see that in the third one, but you kind of see it a little bit in the second one too. So let's talk about the cast in this one. So you got Tim Allen, Judge Reinhold, who basically, if it weren't for Fast Times at Ridgemont High and Beverly Hills Cop, I don't think people would know him from anything else other than playing Neil in this movie, right?
Right, yeah, honestly.
Mary Gross from SNL is in here. She was old school SNL. Peter Boyle, who was the dad on Everybody Loves Raymond, is in this as his boss. Eric Lloyd is the one who plays Charlie, and then David Krumholtz plays Bernard. So Bernard is the head elf. All the others are clearly kids. Bernard is kind of, sort of, maybe like he looks like sort of a teenager. But he's like the head elf, and so he's the wise one that, you know, kind of like guides him along on his path. I'm gonna send the list to your house, and you know, you got all these FedEx trucks pulling away after they dropped off the entire list to his house. You know, he's got to check it twice. There are a lot of things that Bernard does to help carry this story along, and I wonder if that was always the intent, or as they were writing it, they were like, it needs a Bernard to explain the rules, to explain what he's doing and what happened and all that kind of stuff, because Bernard really is the one who kind of tells Scott and us along the way what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, they think that Charlie's been kidnapped by Santa, and they send out the police, and there's a scene where the police are surrounding the house. And I'm thinking, is this really the most important thing happening in this town, that we had to release the entire SWAT team?
I've never thought about it.
I mean, there are at least 20, like 30 cops, like in full, like, you know, combat gear here to get Santa.
There are.
Is this the most high-profile thing? Like, I feel like it's, if the kids hasn't been missing for more than 24 hours, I don't know. So it's, you know, this is weird to me. But they get Santa and they take him out, and then, of course, they have to call in ELFS. So do you, because I had to look this up and pause and all that, do you know what ELFS stands for?
Ooh, so I don't know exactly. All I remember is elves with attitude, but I don't remember like what the acronym was.
That was a good line, by the way. Yeah, he's like, we're elves with attitude. So it's, and I was kind of waiting to see if I would see anything in the chat about it. So somebody said I can only picture Judge Reinhold in a pirate costume. So again, back to Fast Times at Ridgemont High when he worked at the fish place. I think it was a fish place. Anyway, so it stands for Effective Liberating Flight Squad. So I guess the idea is whenever you need to have Santa liberated from somewhere, you send in ELFS.
Huh. Okay.
Doesn't really make a lot of sense, but it fits the acronym, so why not, right? So
yeah, right.
That was a cool, cute scene because they fly there, they rescue Charlie, they go to the police station, they tie up the cop in tinsel, they use tinsel to cut the hinges off the jail cell, and you know they let Santa get out. They go back to the house. They have
wait. Before that, they cut the tinsel, and then you have someone in jail saying, "Hey kid, can I have some of that?"
Yes. Yes, exactly.
So funny.
Yeah. So when they get out, they go back to the house. And Charlie is, and obviously we're simplifying this, but most people have seen the first one, I would think. It is to me one of the big holiday classics, so I think most people have seen it. But they go back to the house because he's dropped his hat, and then he goes and they like see the Neil and Mom, and he's like, oh well, we're gonna leave him here. And at that point, the mom realizes somehow that he really is now Santa. And then she kind of talks about him as if she knew him, like back when he was, like when she was a little girl. And it makes this weird kind of transition as if he's always been Santa since the dawn of time. Like he gets all the memories somehow, right? What is that about?
I have no idea. I don't know if they make it seem like it's something like in his eyes or, something like that. Because she like really stares at him. And kind of like, oh my gosh, this is Santa, kind of thing. But I've always thought it was in his eyes.
Yeah, it's very strange. And then she, of course, they've talked earlier in the movie about what she was supposed to get for Christmas, and she didn't, and what Neil was supposed to get. And then they get the presents that they were always supposed to get. He takes off to save the rest of Christmas. There's one scene that I always quote, and it, again, kind of drives me crazy that I do, where he and Charlie are leaving the North Pole. Charlie's showing him how he's got the CD, which is the cocoa dispenser. And he's, all these things that he's done with the elves to upgrade. This 12-year-old kid, has clearly upgraded the North Pole. And he's like, Charlie, how could I have done this without you? And Charlie goes, you couldn't. Just like, there's no D. It's like, you couldn't. And I say that all the time. And just ask anybody, I annoy them about that. But it's just for some reason, and I don't like the scene. I just quote it. Watch it next time, right? How could I have done without you, Charlie? You couldn't. So clearly, he is a genius when it comes to technology, not so much with completing words. So then, the movie's over. He gets the glass ball. He goes off into the moon, like all good Christmas shows where the reindeer go off into the silhouette of the moon and everything's done. Mm-hmm. I think you could have left it with that. I think that movie did not have to have sequels, that it was like Elf didn't have to have a sequel, and I'm kind of glad that it never did, and I really hope they never go back to that movie because it didn't need one. I would
stop motion animation one.
Yeah, but that's like Elf the Musical. That's like a remake kind of a thing, right? That's not really a sequel, is it?
I thought it was a sequel. There's an animated musical. Yeah, there's an animated musical, but I thought it was a sequel.
If it is, it was a mistake. But then there are these movies that stand alone. Like A Christmas Story has had sort of like some retell, like The Summer Story or something like that. I think that this one just could have stood alone on its own. It told the whole story. It's Scott's redemption arc from this like cold calculating businessman to, which they revisit later in the movies, to this, to being Santa, to actually becoming Santa. And so to me, I think it was kind of the perfect movie as it was, and one of my favorites. And then came the second one, the Santa Clause 2, the Mrs. Claus.
Yep.
What are your feelings on this one?
This one's my favorite out of the trilogy.
Really?
So I love the Escape Clause. I love the Santa Clause 3, but I'm a huge Martin Short fan. I think he was just hilarious in that role. But I love the Santa Clause 2. I love the world building that they did in the Santa Clause 2. I love his watch. There's a lot of aspects in the Santa Clause 2 that, believe it or not, like real life Santa's helpers emulate what Santa Clause 2 did with his outfit, with his gadgets, with everything. That they try to emulate that so much because it is pretty much like the perfect looking, Santa. I just love it, and I love Mrs. Claus, and I love the whole story arc there. Um, and when we talk about it, my sisters and I always laugh at one particular line in this movie. And when we get there, I will share it with you guys.
Yikes. So for those of you who don't know, and for gosh sakes, I don't know how you wouldn't know this. Again, if you watched this movie, the second one is all about him finding a wife. There's another clause. It's been 10 years, and it opens up on, like you said, it's world building. It opens up on the North Pole. The first one we open up in, it's the office building where Scott works with there's an office Santa. It's like the boss who's been drinking or something like that. And it's like a party. It's like an office party. And then we don't really get to the world of the North Pole until like the second act. In this one, it starts at the North Pole, and you're getting that vibe of everything's great. He's been Santa for 10 years. Everything's fantastic. And I feel like it takes you there to show you, hey, everything's been happening great. Let us tell you how we can screw this up now. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, isn't that usually the second movie of whatever is to undo everything they did in the first one?
Yeah.
So, yeah. So in the second one, as you said, he's been there for a while. There's a new elf. There's a number 2 elf, Curtis, who's played by Spencer Breslin, who I was thinking I knew a lot more about Spencer Breslin and his work than I actually do. He was in Disney's The Kid and these movies. He's in there when it first opens up. Everything's great, and then all of a sudden, some plane is coming, and they don't want to be found, so they go silent. They go to like ElfCon 1, and they go silent. And when they do, then Curtis is blasting some Christmas music, and the guys in the plane are like, wait a minute, what's going on here? Santa's trying to track down where this noise is coming from. They find Curtis. He's just chilling out. Now, apparently, Curtis has been like the archivist here. He's been like the lead, guy about all things Santa for a while now, and yet we didn't meet him in the first movie. Now, Bernard is still here in this movie, but Curtis, this is when we first get introduced to Curtis. And then also, like, as it's going on, you just realize, like, Curtis is, I don't know, he gets on my nerves a little. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as Santa's here and he's playing football with the elves and he's really fitting in. And by the way, when he's playing football, his jersey says 25, December 25th. Everything's great. There's a secret that they don't want to tell him, and it's about this Mrs. Claus. But then he also finds out along the way that his son, the worst thing ever has happened with his son. I can't even speak it. Just say it.
He's on the naughty list. Ooh.
How? I mean, it's awful. I mean, who'd have thought Charlie, of all people? So Charlie's on a little bit of a teen angst thing, and he's spray painting bad things about the principal not liking Christmas, and she keeps catching him. So the principal is played by Elizabeth Mitchell. And so she was in, like, what I remember her from was Lost, the TV show. She was on Lost. But, like, when I see her in this one, apparently she was not the first choice for the role, but I think she did an excellent job playing this role. And you talked a little bit about that before, too, right? You think this was... Yeah,
I really liked her. She's able to play that stern character that you need her to play when she is the principal. And when she's in that, like, principal role. But even when she, later on in the movie, well, her and Scott get to know each other, she kind of lets her guard down, and you can see that she is still that person that she is, in the principal role, but there's so much more about her, and she is, likable. And then at the end of the movie, I feel like it's just a whole nother person, but yet still really, really likable throughout the whole movie, honestly. At least that's my take.
Yeah, and there's something about her that reminds me of, and now I'm forgetting her name. She played Supergirl, Helen Slater, and then you're like, who? If you watch the TV show Supergirl, she was actually in the movie Supergirl, which was like 80s, I think. And then she played Supergirl's mom in the CW TV show, if you watch that. But yeah. So she has a very similar look to it. But the principal is always on to Charlie. There are several scenes where she's just right there. She has this whole, like, you're a mean one, Mr. Grinch vibe. She doesn't like Christmas. And then when Santa comes home, he comes back home because he's got two things to do. He's got to check out why Charlie's on the naughty list, and he's got to find a wife. He's been sent back home so that he can find a wife. He's given this watch, as you mentioned, and the watch has magic on it, and it tells him how much magic he's got left before it's gone. He's got to find a wife before December 24th, so we got a clock running. And so he comes back. He tries a couple dates. He's got a weird one with Molly Shannon. Thank goodness he didn't get paired up with Molly Shannon, because that's a lot. And so then he goes to the school. Yeah, right? He goes to the school to talk to the principal, the mean old principal, and he's kind of like, at odds with her. And when he's talking to her, he's like, oh, well, how come there are no decorations in the hallway? Now, knowing educators, today you don't do that. Like, you just don't, because there are too many different, it's about inclusion, really. There are too many different religions and beliefs and non-beliefs. You don't just assume Christmas and put it everywhere. But that's not the reason they give here. And this was not that long ago. This sequel comes 2004. The reason they give is because they don't have the funds to do it, that they're spending the money on other things. And they want to focus on academics. But again, today you just wouldn't do that in a public school that I've seen. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, people in the chat could say I'm wrong on this, but they just don't do that in public schools anymore and put up Christmas decorations and trees and things like that. Again, unless you're being very inclusive about like a Kwanzaa, anybody's beliefs, all of it has to be there, or none of it really can be. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. But in the school, there's no decorations, and so that's kind of why he's lashing out, why Charlie's lashing out, because he's the son of Santa, and of course he wants to make sure that there's Christmas in everyone's heart all the time, especially at school, I guess. So Scott hands her some money, is like, here, buy a wreath. So again, they're at odds here, but he's starting to, the desantification process has happened.
Yes.
The desantification process has happened. I wish I could get the desantification process happening, because whatever's happening with Scott, man, by the end of the desantification, he's looking svelte, he's looking sharp. And the funny thing is, like, that's Tim Allen anyway, but for some reason it was really impressive because he had lost all this weight and he didn't have the gray hair, and so give me some of that. But before he can leave the North Pole, we missed a very important thing, that he needs a replacement at the North Pole. Can you tell me why he needs a replacement at the North Pole? Because I feel like he has a number 1 and a number 2 elf. Why does he need a replacement?
I never understood this. This is, honestly speaking, this whole second Santa thing, I can live without in this movie. I just don't understand it. It's like, why do all the elves need to know anything? Like, if Santa leaves, or do all the elves get notifications or something? And it's like, oh, Santa left.
Right.
I just don't understand.
Well, and there aren't elves that know he's leaving, because they're the ones that are getting the sleigh together for him to take off. So, and they make up this big thing about, well, Santa's looking a little plasticky. So the way they make a new Santa is they take Santa and they put him into a toy machine and they make an exact copy of him, but it's not an exact copy because he's plastic. But it's actually a pretty cool looking thing. I actually have so this is fake Santa. It's actually really well done. The plastic hair and the face and the hands and the whole thing. I mean, it's really well done. Like, I almost think, like, they should do a movie with just the fake Santa if, he wasn't also, like, a little, I don't know, he was a little over the top. So they make a fake Santa. but I don't. That's the thing, is like it doesn't seem to make sense that he has to be there. It seems like a very like non-important part. Like there's already peril. He's being de-Santified. He has to get married before December 24th. Why do we need this second story? Why, Wolf? Why?
Like there's already, like you said, there's that one, but then you also have the whole thing of like, oh, Charlie's on the naughty list. We need to fix that. So it's like, why put a third one? And then it's just not a good one.
I don't like this.
Yeah, I don't either, Regis. I don't either.
Yeah, so I really feel like, I mean, I'm with you. I kind of like this movie, even though I just said I'm not sure it needed to happen, that the first movie kind of was where it was, but they have to undo everything, and he has to, now meaning this, being Santa is more important to him than anything, so he needs to get back to it. And again, this second thing is just meh. And this is a story that, like, again, when we did Noel, this was kind of a story that they've already told many times before, Futurama, with Santa and taking it to the extreme of naughty versus nice. If they've done anything naughty, they get coal. And the same thing with Noel and that weird number that Cousin Gabe came up with like 2,847 nice kids and everyone else is naughty and getting coal via email or like, drones or whatever. And so in this movie, he's going over the top with the whole, there are no nice kids, because every kid has been doing something wrong. He hasn't been flossing. He's talking back to his parents. Every kid's done something wrong. And Curtis says, well, we usually like to give him a little bit of slack around the holidays, which I thought was an interesting take. But making the second Santa was Curtis's idea. He gets out of control. He makes toy soldiers that are very scary looking.
Yeah.
Again, the first movie was PG. These second two are G. That was a pretty intense scene with these oversized, like, soldiers, no?
No, I agree. They're hideous looking.
They are.
Like, I get it.
But in Act 3, the elves can take them apart pretty easily, which I'm like, why didn't you do that from the beginning? I don't know. Like, they basically knock them over playing football, and they're just in pieces. So
I thought that was usually Santa, remember?
Yes.
We have the Santa. The elves can't know.
Yeah. Also, his plastic butt. Like, again, they show this plastic butt all close up and everything. So, again, should it have had PG? Maybe. I don't know. So then, so back with Charlie and Scott, he's met up with Carol, who at the time I didn't see it coming. Christmas Carol. How do you not see that coming? But he meets up with Carol, the principal. They start to hit it off. She likes him, and almost immediately we go back to the whole crazy thing where he tells her the whole story, and just very casually, like, I'm Santa. Didn't you see the reindeer and the presents that I got and the Secret Santa and all that kind of stuff? And he's like, and she's like, no, stop it. And he's like, no, I'm serious. And she goes, you're crazy. You're afraid of commitment. Get out. At this point, I don't know how much time has passed, but I feel like it's probably still too soon to just say I'm Santa. But I feel like that he should have saved some of the magic for like a proof thing. But then again, the whole motto of the first movie is, seeing isn't always believing, believing is seeing.
Yeah.
So I guess I get that, but it just seemed a little bit like weird for all that to happen. There was the scene at this holiday Christmas party, though, that I want to talk about. Because you're a collector.
Yep.
I'm a collector. If any of these pop boxes are the least bit dented, I'm going to, freak out.
Same.
Santa, or Scott, decides that the party's pretty lame and he wants to give out Secret Santa gifts. So he gives gifts to all of these faculty of this school who are there for like a faculty mixer. And he gives them all these vintage mint in box games. And the first thing they do, gosh, I can hardly say it, is they open them. They open them. I mean, it hurts. Did it hurt you?
It does. Especially like since I collect like 1-to-1 scale replicas of toy items. Some of them are retro toys. Some of them are, and I'm like, oh no.
Yeah. So I mean, it was pretty upsetting. to see them opening up this like vintage Rock'em Sock'em robots and the vintage. What was the other one that was there? I can't remember. But honestly, if like somebody gave me like a vintage Evel Knievel or a vintage Stretch Armstrong, like the original legit, like I would probably just Teddy Ruxpin. I would probably leave it in the box. I would love it, but I would probably leave it in the box. Wouldn't sell it, but I couldn't bring myself to just play with it. But it was great. That was the whole idea, is that they hadn't just played, and so he was bringing joy to them, and that worked out. But again, the collector in me is just getting like hives like watching this happen. So the other thing that I didn't talk about in this is that we meet and I'm trying to remember the name of it here. I know that I took a note. It's like the Council of Legendary Figures.
Legendary Figures.
Doesn't that start in this movie?
Yes, that starts in this one.
So he is supposed to be meeting with them at the beginning, and that's when he explains to them the desantification thing. But he meets with all these characters, and I feel like I saw this before I saw Rise of the Guardians. Rise of the Guardians is very much like this, that animated movie, where it's Jack Frost, and he meets all of the other legendary like figures like Santa and the Easter Bunny. But this one is a pretty rogues gallery of B-list stars. Kevin Pollak is in this. Aisha Tyler is in this. Peter Boyle, who was in the first movie, is in this uncredited, because he was in the first movie as Scott's boss, and in this one he's Father Time. Hollywood's pretty big.
Love the fact that
you love what?
I love the fact that they threw him in there as Father Time.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. And then also Michael Dorn, who played Worf in all of the Star Trek Next Generation stuff, is in there as the Sandman, which is great. Honestly, kind of my favorite role of his. He is so good in this one. He's always sleepy. And then the Tooth Fairy is in this one as well. And the Easter Bunny is played by Jay Thomas, and I would not have known it had I not looked him up. This is like a comedic actor, Jay Thomas, because it's so over the top, his acting in it, and also the costume is fantastic. Kevin Pollak floating around in like the sort of the dress as Cupid is kind of funny.
Yeah.
So they decide that they're going to kind of help him and try to figure out what to do, but he's got to go because he can't not be Santa anymore. Here's the other problem I have is if he loses the ability to be Santa, there's not a Santa replacement, right?
I don't know. I don't know if that job then becomes Bernard's job, because he's number one. But yeah, there wouldn't be another Santa.
It seems like you don't make these rules to ruin Christmas, right? Like, why would you make this rule? Yeah. And then if like he can't get a wife, then then like the Santa Claus ends like that. I mean, again,
I don't like this.
So it's just that part of it doesn't make sense, that they would make it difficult to be Santa, especially when he's already been a good Santa for so many years. So anyway, the reason I bring up the Council of Legendary Figures, other than to say about like the actors in here, because Aisha Tyler is one of my favorites. I love her as Lana Kane on Archer. She does like the Whose Line Is It Anyway host. She's great. So I love her as the role of Mother Nature is great. But is that when he runs out of magic, he then finds out from Curtis that everything's gone to pot back at the North Pole, that this new Santa has taken over. He's kind of gone all military. Every kid's going to get coal. We need you back. And so he's got to get back, but he can't get back because he has no more Christmas magic. And then Comet has eaten so much chocolate that Comet can't go anywhere. And again, he got real fat real fast. Like, again, I'm not sure how much time has passed here, but it wasn't good.
Yeah.
So then he decides. What's that?
Like, the animatronic for Comet is such a good one.
That's not the real Comet?
Yeah. He looks great.
Okay. Yeah, and all the way that the reindeer speak, it's like, "Arr, arr, arr, arr." I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's crazy. So the way that he decides he's going to get back is that he decides that he's going to pull out his own tooth, so the Tooth Fairy will come and see him, and he can catch the Tooth Fairy and have the Tooth Fairy flying back to the North Pole. Obviously, so that's all weird. But then his niece, which again, not his real niece, it's his wife's new daughter with her new husband, Lucy, who they're just as close as can be as a family. It's just a little weird, but I'm happy for them. So Lucy loses a tooth. He catches the Tooth Fairy by the wing, which apparently is a thing you can do. I didn't know you could do that.
Now you know.
I know. So if I ever see the Tooth Fairy, that's how I catch a Tooth Fairy. And the Tooth Fairy's like, he's like, let me go. I only got $20 on me. Don't do it. Okay.
Yeah, don't do it. It's a lot.
Okay, so he has the Tooth Fairy fly him and Curtis back to the North Pole, and then while he's doing that, Charlie decides to come and talk to the principal and say, hey, look, I know you're with my dad, and I wasn't cool with it, but let me show you this magic snow globe, and then you'll believe in Christmas, and that he's really Santa Claus, and then it works. So it was so quick for her to dismiss him, and then so quick for her to come back.
Yeah.
So maybe the problem is it's only like a 90-minute movie. Am I asking too much from a 90-minute movie?
Maybe a little too much. But then at the same time, it does go back to the whole, like, you know, seeing isn't believing, believing is seeing. Because he tells her that. That's like Charlie's famous line for every single movie. He tells her that, and then she looks at the snow globe. Which I always thought she just sees her memories with Santa or something like that. You never see what she sees, but I always thought, just like in the first one, with the mom looking at him and like seeing Santa, it was kind of like the same thing this time around.
Yeah. I'm looking in chat to see that Paul seems to have a lot of information about the Santa Claus.
Yep.
And also, Adam says that fake Santa has the worst jokes ever, which
he does.
Yeah, agree, Adam. So anyway, he comes back. They all decide to gang up on fake Santa, and then during this whole thing, they beat fake Santa. But now time's running out, and then here comes Carol. The Charlie comes down through like the skylight to help. You know, Charlie to the rescue. And he's lost a tooth because he used that to get the Tooth Fairy to bring the Carol and himself to the North Pole. So apparently, like father, like son, when it comes to cockamamie schemes to get to the North Pole.
Right.
So then he's got to get married, and he's got to get married quick, right? Because like it's like 10 minutes till midnight. And so they go ahead and they get all dressed up, and the way he proposed to her is basically like, hey, there's a lot of cool stuff here, you should marry me.
Yeah.
He doesn't, I mean, I can only imagine proposing to somebody and saying, look, you know, we're all right together, but check out all the pops I've got. I mean, these could all be partially yours if we if we get married, or or to say, hey, my family's pretty cool if you want to hang out with us. I mean, not I love you, I can't live without you, you mean the world to me, these past 20 days have been great. No, it's just like, hey, look around, all this stuff's cool, right? We should get married. And then she's like, okay. And then they get married, and then he re-Santifies. And I'm thinking, that's weird, because again, I said earlier, Tim's looking pretty smart. He's got the fit going, right? And then like she marries him, and it's just like the jelly thing, and he fills out the suit, and it's crazy. So then, they save Christmas, and everything's great, and they shrink the fake Santa down and put him on a shelf somewhere to sell him in the post-scene credits.
And he becomes one of those dancing Santas.
Yeah. So this one is your favorite. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, this one actually is my favorite, yep.
Okay. I mean, I guess that's not weird. So then let's go on to the last one. Oh, by the way, one thing that the fake Santa says to him as he's trying to wrestle the fake Santa and the sleigh back down to the ground, what does he say to him?
Don't
let me down here, dude.
You're a sad, strange little man.
Yes. He quotes Buzz Lightyear with the "You're a sad, strange little man."
Before we head to the Santa Clause 3, so my sisters and I, we laugh. My sister, for some reason, I remember this, like, watching this movie a lot when I was a kid. And actually, we have our first dog is named Charlie because we got him for Christmas. So we all agreed on Charlie after. But there's a scene with Lucy and Charlie. Lucy finally figures out, because throughout the whole movie, she's knowing that Scott is Santa. Like, she's like, oh, are you Santa because you have a reindeer? And are you Santa because, this and that? And it finally gets to the point that she does. Charlie sits her down, and they look at the fireplace, and here comes Santa coming out. And and it's such a funny thing because Charlie's explaining to her that, now that you know this secret, you can't tell anyone, like, this is going to be our secret, this is our family secret, this and that. And she hugs Charlie, and she's like, oh, I love you, Charlie. And then in an instant, and this is where my sister just dies every single time, in an instant she's hugging him, and she goes, but do I still get presents? And I'm telling you, my sister, every single time that I watch the movie, like, I send her a little clip of that, and she just dies. It was such a funny thing. Like, we had to rewind it every single time because she would just laugh and laugh and laugh at just that little split second. Because Lucy does it actually very funny. Like, it's a split, like, oh, this is so wonderful. Wait! So, I had to share that with you guys.
Yikes. Okay. Well, that's true. So before we leave this too, at the very post-credit scene, we see Mrs. Claus, and I don't have a really good picture, so I'm going to do this. We see her, and she's gotten fat.
Yeah.
So she's gotten fat, and again, we don't know passage of time, but she's gotten fat. She's got the fat suit on, and she's doing the moonwalk, and some other weird stuff is happening. But she had just been, when he re-santified, she didn't, like, automatically turn fat. So there was one of those things where that happened. But in the next movie, she's not fat. Yeah. It opens up with her in a school, because that was something they talked about at the end of the last one, that she would stick around. And that was another reason to get married, because, oh, y'all don't have a school here. I guess I could be the teacher or the principal. So, yeah, I guess I'll marry you so I could be the principal. So in that one, she's not fat. And then it starts out with her in the school, and she's a teacher, and then one of the elves raises a hand, asks a question, and it's Abigail Breslin. So yeah. Spencer Breslin is Curtis in the second and third movies, and here's Abigail Breslin in the third movie. So it's a family business. But that bothered me that at the end of 2 she's fat, because apparently that's what happens to Mrs. Claus, but then she wasn't in the third one. Am I weird about that?
I never understood that, because I don't necessarily think Mrs. Claus has to be, kind of thing. Like, so it was a very odd choice for them to just do that. I think, at least in the end of the 2.
And even at the end of that, she's not like. It's not that she's like all that fat, but she is at the end of the second one. But in the third one, she's even pregnant, and her face isn't as big as it is at the end of the second one.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point. Yeah.
That's kind of weird. But it's like, hey, they were talking about, like, how things have been since they've been at the North Pole, and she raises her hand and asks the question, and so then they flash back to her having fake contractions, and then trying to figure out, like, when's the baby due, and now she's all sad because the baby's not coming. But the baby might come the same time he's out delivering presents. that one night, and so she wants her whole family to be there. He's Santa. He's going to fix it for her. One of the things that happens, though, is he decides to cheer her up by giving the baby a gift, and he walks out the door and he comes down his own chimney, which is a picture of his whole face. And I'm gonna have to find this because it's ridiculous, right?
It is. It's ridiculous, but at the same time, it's so weird that it looks like Tim Allen's Santa Claus.
Yeah.
Like they went into that detail that it resembles him as Santa.
Yeah, and I can't find it here.
Oh, well, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, in the second one, when he has that date, when she takes off her coat, she's wearing a Santa-like sweater, and it is his face.
Yes, that is true.
Yeah.
And that was the Molly Shannon, who was like a super fan.
Yeah.
Right, so let me pull this up. I mean, when I was watching it for some reason, and I don't know why it bugged me, but it did. All right, so like, I mean,
Yeah.
would you have a chimney? I mean, a fireplace of your own face. Plus, it looks like Zeus, maybe, or like some like god of hellfire. I don't know. It's just.
Yeah, it's such a weird.
It's super off-putting to have a chimney of himself in here. I don't know. That was kind of crazy to me. But so he decides he's going to bring his in-laws, played by Anne Margaret and Alan Arkin, to the North Pole to be with her. But he can't give away the SOS. What is SOS, Eric?
Secret of Santa.
There you go. So he can't give away the SOS. So he decides he's gonna make pretend that the entire North Pole is really some section of Canada that they've never visited before. I don't know. So meanwhile, at the same time, while it's his busy season, he's trying to figure this out. She needs some attention. He's going to make it right by bringing her family. He goes. He's got a meeting with, of course, the Council of Legendary Figures. And this time there's a problem. It was an emergency meeting because they have to deal with Jack Frost.
Yep.
I kind of hate this part of the movie.
This whole, like, having to deal with the problem?
Yeah. Because I don't like it when people get in trouble, especially when it's something that they didn't do. And maybe that's just a flashback to my own childhood, and I've got to, maybe go and have that looked at somewhere. We don't, I mean, in most cases, we don't talk about Jack Frost too much. We talked about Rise of the Guardians, and he was in that one, but he's not really a bad guy. There is a special, one of those Rankin and Bass specials, like we talked about earlier, where you've got Jack Frost in it, and he's like a little bit mischievous. But in this one, he's kind of evil. What's that?
I think that's the one with Frosty.
Yes. So in this one, he's kind of evil, and I don't particularly care for it. It's played by Martin Short, though, who did a great job. I mean, you talked about Martin Short earlier on, too, right?
Yeah. No, it's just, I think, wonderful casting. This movie, In-Laws, great casting. Martin Short, great casting. I just think overall they did such a wonderful job. And yeah, he nailed like being likable, but in an annoying way that you kind of like, I don't know why I like this character, but I do.
Yeah, I mean, I guess he's kind of funny. I mean, he's in a lot of ways he just plays himself. I mean, he plays the Martin Short that we see in so many other things. So, I don't like it when people get in trouble for, like I said, for things like the Brady Bunch. If I watch reruns of the Brady Bunch and Bobby puts too much soap in the washing machine, that freaks me out. And so in this one, he's trying to do all these things to make his in-laws happy, to bring them back to the North Pole. He finds out that now he's got to bring Neil and his ex-wife and Lucy because they want to come if everyone else gets to come, because Lucy's the only one that hasn't gotten to see the North Pole, and now Neil is playing Lucy against Scott to convince him for this to happen just because Neil wants to come. I hate everybody in this part. It's just so the Council of Legendary Figures wants him to, they want to do something about Jack Frost trying to steal Christmas from Santa. Santa goes, you know what? He says to him, like, can you give me a chance, Santa? I can work for you. I can work off community service, whatever. He's like, great, you can work here. And then he finds ways to mess up everything for Santa. So it's like he's trying to make him look bad. He's screwing up things for him. He's breaking equipment. He's tricking elves into doing things. It drives me bananas.
That scene in the kitchen. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
He's just like, and it's shot so beautifully because everyone else like is very just not paying attention. He just turns around, unscrewing that, and then he's just taking cocoa, and it looks like to anyone else, it looks like that he's just making some cocoa, and he's just trying to dodge these elves that are in the way. But like in the camera, you see him just undoing so much. Like it drives me nuts seeing that scene.
Yeah. So in this scene, he's messing everything up, and he never gets caught that he was messing things up. I don't think they ever like figure out that he was the one doing all these things. Now they do find out that he was the one that freezes Lucy's parents, but they don't find out everything on this one. So that drives me a little bit crazy. And again, that's my own personal cross to bear. I'll get over it, but that drives me crazy. So when now he's got to like mess everything up for the in-laws. The in-laws come. They're not all that impressed with Scott anyway because he's kept them away from their daughter for a few years now, and they never get to see her, and now she's pregnant. But they're taking a walk around, and they're trying to convince the in-laws that this is Canada and that everyone's short in Canada because the elves are always saying A after everything to convince them that it's Canada. So everything seems to be going wrong for Scott because he's trying to fix all the mess that was happening in the workshop that Jack caused, and now Jack's trying to cause trouble in his home life. And then he's also found out about, from Curtis, this Hall of Snow Globes that is going to allow Santa to use the escape clause. So the first movie is the Santa Clause, the second one is Santa Clause 2, but I feel like it's the Mrs. Claus, and the third one is the escape clause. So in this one, it's the idea that he can undo all the years of him being Santa. And so there's a whole bit where Curtis like tells him everything, which again, I'm like, no, Curtis, don't do it. This time, don't do it. I've watched this movie 5 times, but this time, don't do it.
Yeah.
It just drives me crazy. Like, so then, he finds out that that's where he needs to go, but he doesn't know where the Hall of Snow Globes is. He tricks Lucy into getting him into the Hall of Snow Globes, and he, basically everything is so sad that now he's got the snow globe, and he convinces Santa to say, I wish I was never Santa Claus at all. And then when he does that, he grabs him, and they go back to that moment when Scott first put on the jacket or Santa first fell off the roof. And they're both there together, and they both know that this is the moment when either of them now can become Santa.
Yeah.
And it feels very Back to the Future 2. Did you ever see Back to the Future 2?
Yeah, no, definitely.
So they're using all this old footage of the original movie, and they're interacting with it by hiding behind a snowman and seeing how it's all going down. And it's the actual footage from Santa Clause 1. And so, they see the whole thing play out, but instead of Santa or Tim Allen or Scott Calvin yelling, hey, you, Jack Frost yells, hey, you, Santa falls off the roof. But in this telling, as soon as he hits the ground, basically he disappears. The suit's there for the taking. There's no little sad little wave, any of that kind of stuff. And so he goes and he puts on the jacket, and now Scott disappears and appears in like 10 years in the future, but he's now this like successful businessman talking to Kripke from Big Bang Theory.
Yeah.
So apparently with him never having had that moment, now he's a super successful, very rich businessman with a Ferrari. But everyone in his life hates him because he's just been so selfish all these years. And so he goes back to try to find Charlie, and Charlie and his mom are there, but now Neil and Lucy aren't because they're at the North Pole because Jack Frost has made the North Pole a tourist spot.
Yeah.
Which,
and they got divorced.
What?
They also got divorced, too.
Yes.
The mom and Neil.
And also the mom looks like she might be a waitress because she's got a name tag on. And yeah, so they've kind of fallen on hard times there, but they're still living in the same house. I guess. I don't know. They're just trying to make it seem very sad, right? And so I think, wow, amusement park. I love amusement parks. Like, that's what we do. We love amusement parks. Like, that would be kind of fun. So he's exposed to the secret of Santa, decided that it's too much trouble to deliver gifts. Why not just charge people to come to the North Pole? And it's a little bit weird that I feel like Martin Short would have done this if he could. Like, if he could have set up his own North Pole, like, Vegas lounge act that people could come see, that he might have done that. Is that weird that I think Martin Short would be that kind of guy?
No, I can see it.
Yeah. So
Steve Martin.
Right, and they play the banjo a little bit. The two Caballero, the two amigos. So it's I don't know. This part of it is It's a Wonderful Life. I feel like it was in the beginning. It was sort of, I'm not really sure. It was very sad. And then it was this like Back to the Future 2 thing, and now It's a Wonderful Life because what if I hadn't become Santa? Look at all this would have happened, and now I'm convinced that what I want more than anything is to be Santa. So he goes to the North Pole. He goes in there. He finds Lucy, who's now a brat, and then Neil, who is just a horrible like mess of a man, and convinces Lucy to go to the Hall of Snow Globes and get the snow globe. He records his voice, Jack's voice, saying, "I wish I was never Santa at all." Did we see that coming from the beginning though? When he had the pin, like we knew that's what he was doing, right?
I want to say yeah. Like the second time when he notices that it like can record, then it was one of those like, oh, okay. Especially when Martin Short says it.
Yeah.
And then because he says it, and then we have a little bit of dialogue, and then he like hits it, and it's like, oh yeah, of course, that's what he did.
Yeah, and then he gets to go back and they have the fight all over again to see who's going to actually be Santa. And I honestly love the idea that instead of trying to get the coat, he holds Jack back so that things can play out the way they're supposed to. That Scott gets into the suit, goes up the ladder with Charlie, gets into the sleigh, and goes off and becomes Santa. And then they go back to the North Pole, real time. And he's got that whole, like, Ebenezer Scrooge, It's a Wonderful Life, where he runs down and says, I'm back. I did it. The spirits did it all in one night. I'm happy again. And she's like, you were just gone for, like, 2 seconds. What's the deal?
Yeah.
And so, like, I feel like they could have expanded that whole part a little bit more. I think that the time with Jack as Santa was very short. Like, I feel like there could have been more of that and less of all the mess in the beginning of the movie. I think I would have liked to have seen that more as like that whole thing play out, because he resolves that very quickly from him, like getting thrown back, going to see where, what's happened to his family, going to the North Pole, getting the snow globe back with the help of Lucy, and and then jumping back. It all happens very quickly. I think you could have. That was kind of the fun ride of that one. The director of this one was the same director for 2 and 3, which was different from the director of the first one. So I feel like this was the plan all along, which was to have, once they decided to do 1, to have 2 more episodes that would fit together like this. So. He gets he gets to be Santa again, and now he's got this new inspiration and confidence that he's going to go back and he's going to fix everything, and he's going to tell the in-laws the truth because he knows that they can trust them in the secret of Santa, because obviously in the other dimension, Jack screwed it up by letting the whole world in on the secret. He's just letting in his immediate family and feels confident about that. And they're all happy. I want to know what happened to Bernard, because they don't tell you.
Yeah. And I'm not totally sure. I don't remember off the top of my head if Curtis is now considered number one.
He is.
Or if he's still number two.
No, he is considered number one.
Yeah.
And he says something about, they mention Bernard, but like they don't really tell you what happened to Bernard. And I would assume that David, and I always miss Krumholtz, that I assume he was just too old to play an elf anymore, even though he did it in the movie 2 years prior. I feel like he was just too old to do it. He was in a TV show with Judd Hirsch called Numbers. He got a lot bigger. He started growing a mustache. Like, maybe he just couldn't pull off Bernard anymore. I don't know. But they didn't, to my knowledge, they didn't recast anybody in any of these movies either, which was, interesting, going from, 10 years between the first two movies and 2 years in between the second, to not have to do a Becky situation from Roseanne, where they had to like recast somebody. Everybody was the same. Even Eric Lloyd, who played Charlie, was Charlie in all three movies.
Yeah, I think the elf was recasted for the second one, but it's a role.
Judy, you're right, but she wasn't Judy anymore, I don't think. But she looked almost like her, right? Like the little girl.
I thought maybe it wasn't.
I think it may have not been her, but yeah, she was very close. You're right, and that was something that they would have had to have done, because she was the Coco elf. They would have had to have done that to do that. You're right, but there were a lot of
essentially like helps to Carol.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was a lot. We've covered 3 movies. It was over an hour. So, any other thoughts about these movies before we close this out, Eric?
No, I really, really enjoy these movies. I think with Disney doing so many like reboots and sequels and stuff of like oldies, especially now with Disney Plus, it's like the perfect time for them to do a Santa Clause 4. It's just, I think it's a good time. It's been 15 years, 15 since the last movie. So I think it's a good timing. Let them do it.
So you want there to be a Santa Clause 4?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Okay. And you said when we were doing Noel that you felt like that was could have been a blueprint for a Santa Clause 4?
Yes. I've always thought if you you take a year without a Santa Claus and kind of get live action, I think would kind of be good if you have Scott right in the beginning just feeling sick and not able to do his job, and finding out that there's like a substitute clause or something. But the catch is someone over the age of, let's say, 18 and blood related, which then brings in, it could be Buddy, which the son at the end of Toy Story, listen to me. He has a son at the end of the Santa Claus, but it gives us that threshold of needs to be older than 8. And then you get
so I mean, I know, again, I like that these characters are, in this window of time, that they are, that they are kind of, like, I almost don't want there to be more, but I get what you're saying. Like, there could still be a continuation of the story.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, here's the thing that hits me is that with Hocus Pocus, classic Halloween story from Disney, merch all over the place in the parks.
Yeah.
Nightmare Before Christmas, Halloween and Christmas, merch everywhere in the parks. This seems like one of their biggest marquee movie series for Christmas. Have I just missed? I mean, you're in Florida. Tell me, have I just missed all the Santa Claus merch that's all over the place, or
I think it's
there's just
tricky.
not any? You what?
I think it's tricky. I think it's because of the fact that it is Santa Claus that it's very tricky to have merchandise for this. Yeah, I don't know. I would honestly love it, but I don't think it's marketable. As weird as that sounds.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, I mean, again, it's a marquee movie series for them. They made 3 of these things.
Yeah.
And it just feels like that there should be more connection with these in Disney because they're Disney classics. I think, and while I think you can watch, well, I'm going to wrap it up here and just ask you if there's anything else before we go to your final thoughts on this that you want to talk about. I know again we talked about that there could be more, but is there anything else?
Well, it's funny that you were talking about merchandise because actually last year we got 2 the Santa Claus Funko Pops, and those have actually been the only things that I've seen merchandise wise for it. But yeah, no, like I really really love these movies. I see them every year. I see 2 and 3 honestly more than I see 1.
Right.
And it's because of the world building. I just love it. I love the fact that even because of the world building that they did here for the North Pole, there's a movie called Fred Claus, which took very much the look of the North Pole, and they kind of tried to replicate that for their North Pole. And I always thought that, like, and I think you were hinting at it when we were reviewing Noel, at the
Ooh, I lost you.
like an overall look and an overall, like specific things like for the North Pole, for Santa Claus, for, these are how the elves should look. These are how, the reindeer should look, the sleigh kind of thing. And I think one of the things that you can definitely take from this movie and replicate for everything, I feel, is the North Pole. The North Pole looks beautiful in these 2 movies, especially in Part 3 where they expanded even more than what they did in the second one.
Yeah. Okay, I'm all for that. So
Yeah.
then, let me ask you. So we've talked about all 3 of these movies. I want you to rate it as a trilogy here now, and to tell me, Eric Wolf, here's the moment. Would you recommend these movies?
Oh, so I'm gonna start off right off the bat. Yes, I recommend these movies. If you haven't seen them, see them. They're just such a fun holiday film. They're just very fun holiday films. And you get basically, like the second one is that I guess you can say, and I guess that's why I like it so much. It's like your typical holiday romance kind of movie, but it's intertwined with other things, and it's not very like Hallmark, I guess you can say, and what Netflix is doing now with all their holiday like romance movies. But you get the aspects and you get that in it, and then you have 3, which with Martin Short, with the introduction of Martin Short, is just totally just comical, and I think that works in itself. But bookend them all 3 together, such a wonderful trilogy to see, and to see the story and the arc between both Scott and Charlie, and basically like you said, it all started because of Scott and Charlie, and the fact that it's such a father and son relationship that he wants to have, that all 3 movies pretty much they what's the word that I'm looking for?
Compliment?
Yes, they complement each other well for that whole story arc. But yeah, definitely, I would give this. I would give the whole trilogy 8 Jingle Bells out of 10.
8 Jingle Balls out of 10. Okay. You know what? I think if someone hadn't seen these movies, I would definitely recommend them to them. They are not, as I've said with many things, it's not like a must see for a Disney fan necessarily, because it's not a lot of tie to Disney in particular or Disney history or anything like that they can go back to. But I think in general, these are great family fun movies. I love the fact that that the first movie can stand on its own. If you've never seen the Santa Clause, you need to go watch that. Even though we've talked about it, given away spoilers, whatever, you really need to watch that movie. It's a fun movie. The first time I saw it, it felt like an instant classic, like Elf, like A Christmas Story. It felt like a classic movie. Then the other two movies, like I said, I don't know that they necessarily needed to be done, but I do think it's a fun trilogy, and especially if it's. We used to do this as a tradition on Christmas Day, is we would watch these movies because you've opened up the gifts. You don't really want to go anywhere. Families, the family time, they've come and gone, and it's just a nice. I mean, each of them is about an hour and a half, so it's just a nice way to sit down and kind of enjoy some family fun Christmas movies. And I don't know. To me, these movies have always been Christmas. So I definitely would recommend that anybody watch them. There are a lot of choices now. You've got the Christmas Chronicles and the Christmas Chronicles 2. You've got Jingle Jangle. Now there's Noel, and when you're looking through Disney Plus, there are so many choices. And now that they've bought Fox, you've got the ones that aren't they Christmas movies like Home Alone and Die Hard, and there's just a lot of options when it comes to Christmas movies and specials and everything. And if you go on Disney Plus and you look down, it's all divided by these are the specials and these are the movies and these are the Simpsons episodes. And I mean, you could spend a year almost, it feels like, probably not, but you could almost spend a year watching all of just the holiday stuff that's offered to you on Disney Plus. So I would just recommend that you check these out if you haven't. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't watched them in a while, maybe go back and watch them. Thanks to Paul in the chat, who seems to be a super fan of these movies, so who's watching along, and I love seeing people's comments and what these movies mean to them. So Eric, thanks for recommending that we do this.
Of course.
I feel like I need to go back and watch them again now. I feel like Christmas isn't going to be over until it's Christmas Day and I get to watch these again.
Right.
So
thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Scott, and thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate you. Thank you to our Wigs members. If you haven't if you're still hanging around with us and you haven't hit like and subscribe, please do that. We would love a thumbs up on this one, and we would also like you to subscribe to this channel. Eric is on here every other week with Geekly Kingdom. We've got Cosmic Read. We've got so many cool shows on here, and we just want to get a lot of subscribes so that we can get the word out to you when we are going live on these shows. So please subscribe to this channel. And again, to our Wigs members, if you are not a Wigs member, patreon.com/WDWNT. But to our Wigs members, thank you so much. Have a great holiday. We have one more movie coming next week before the end of the year. One last Deep in the Plus before 2021. So join us for Babes in Toyland. Thanks a lot. Thanks, Eric. Appreciate you. Have a good one.
Thank you. Bye.